I got my first job at a reading. I went to read for a part, and I'd missed the studio. I got 4A instead of 4. And they'd gone and closed up. By the time I sat there for 2 hours waiting, as you did in those days, and I had the script and I was looking at it all the time. And the commissioner behind the counter said, oh, they closed up, they left ages ago, the BBC lot. And then a woman came down the stairs screaming and saw me sitting there, and she said, oh, it's you, it must be you, come upstairs. And she grabbed me and took me out. Anyway, I read, and then she said, who are you, rather crossly. I read a scene, and I said, well, I've come to do whatever the play was for BBC television at Alexandra Palace. She said, we're not television, we're not BBC, we're casting a play. And I got part. I'm not going to story, it's far too long. But that made me star overnight, and all that rubbish. You don't become a star overnight, it takes 100 years to be a star. But putting my script, which I've described in one of my books, putting my script from the BBC, which I no longer had any need for, into the trash can in Piccadilly Underground station. I was going to Victoria to go home to my parents' cottage. I didn't realize that I was getting rid of the BBC script as well as my anonymity for the rest of my life. It never occurred to me. You're not considered seriously in this country unless you've been on the stage and done all that crap. I did start off in the theatre, yes indeed, and I suppose because it was in my blood. My mother was an actress monkey, because my father forbade her to act the moment they got married. So she was in resentment all her life, from which we suffered. The noise of that curtain going up, and the audience, the house lights going down, and the audience voices, because it becomes one voice, softening away to nothing, and the curtain going up, and that whoosh. You can hear it on stage, you can't hear it in the audience. Is, I suppose, the prelude to You're On. And your heart races, and the adrenaline flows, and you're on, and that's it. And you're there to entertain for 2.5 hours, or whatever it is. And it is one of the most exciting noises in the world. As long as you don't see the audience's face, I find that very disconcerting. I used to play always to the exit light, or gents, or ladies, but I hardly ever played to a face. That was death, if you caught a face. On the first night particularly, the last one I did was here in London at the Apollo, and I remember saying, you can't be as frightened as I am now and still be alive. No way can you be. This is as near death, execution, and everything else as I've ever come across. It was much, much more perilous than anything I went through in the war, and I went through 6 years of the war. It is terrifying, and it never gets better. The only way I can describe it is that without it you can't act. I mean, you can't, I don't like acting as a term, but you can't, shall I say, perform. Without that fear, you do not expose your soul, at the risk of being pretentious, and you do not expose a gut that you have that you don't even carry about, you don't know you're carrying about with you as a person, because it releases that terror releases 1 million things in your brain, 1 million titchy things in the cell which come flooding in, and a kind of anodyne. They're an antidote to the poison of terror. We're working with someone like Judy Garland, who was basically a concert behavior. I mean, she was fit for tying every day of her life with terror before a show. And the only moment that she ever felt good in was when that curtain finally came down. And I used one of her lines that she used to me in a scene I wrote for her once, when she said, you know, they say when the lights hit you, the pain and the fear goes, it's a goddamn lie. It doesn't, and it doesn't.
I don't want to be rolled out like a pastry, so everybody get a nice big bite of me. Mm-hmm. I'm just me. I belong to myself. I can do whatever I damn well please with myself, and nobody can ask any questions.
Now, you know that is not true, don't you?
Well, I'm not going to do it anymore, and that's final. It's just not worth all the deaths that I have to die.
You have a show to do tonight. You are going to do it, and I am going to see that you do.
Do you think you can make me sing? Do you think you can? Do you think George can make me sing, or Ida? You can get me there, sure, but can you make me sing?
No,
I sing for myself. I sing when I want to, whenever I want to, just for me. I sing for my own pleasure, whenever I want. Do you understand that?
Yes, I do understand that. Just hang on to that, will you? Hang on to it.
Well, I've hung on to every bit of rubbish there is to hang on to in life. And I've thrown all the good bits away. Now, can you tell me why I do that?
No, no, I can't tell you why you do that, but I can tell you this. You are going to be late.
I don't care.
On the Patricia Neal story with Glenda Jackson, the American crew were fascinated because we never left the set. I never leave a set. I always sit in a corner or on the set. I don't go to my dressing room unless I want to go and have a pee or whatever. I remember Glenda preparing just for a moment for a long, long take with me. And she was preparing, she went to the corner and said she was okay. And then she put down her head and I could see her eyes closed and she was just getting everything. And she was so, her body began to sort of force. It was the most extraordinary sight to see. Nothing really happened, but she seemed to swell with this passion. And then she just said, okay, and went. But if you'd touched her, I promise you she'd have exploded into shattered bits because the concentration was so intense. And that's why I think Death in Venice practically did for me, because that was 8 months and I was entirely alone. I had no one with me. I had to keep this wretched little von Aschenbach, peevish fellow though he was, with me all day long. I never went to a lunch or anything. And Visconti never asked me to. I mean, they used to break and have lunch on that damn beach. I had a tin of beer and a lightly boiled sole, and I can't tell you how boring that is for 8 months. But I couldn't eat anything else because I was holding him. I know it sounds rather pretentious, but I really was. It's the only way I can work.
You haven't heard anything, have you, sir?
No.
I mean, after what you said, I couldn't help but, well, it was the truth. That's what I'm trying to say. Nearly everything you said, I could never have said it. You know what I mean, sir?
It was my duty to say it.
Oh, I don't know about that, sir.
It was my duty. If you'd remembered your duty, none of this idiotic rigmarole would have been necessary. How did you get that into your head? Don't thank me for doing my duty. I had to. Just as you should have done yours.
Yes, sir. It's not as if I haven't thought about it, sir. I have. I know what they could do to me. It's just that, I wouldn't be thinking I stood a chance if it hadn't been for you.
I remember working with people in the past, especially method actors, like Gene Hackman, for example, who's a beautiful, wonderful actor, once. He can't do it, he can't repeat. I mean, he can, but it's not the same. The first time is just a kind of power. But by that time, he's given all his energy away. And I know another actor who is not named. I loved him very dearly, and he won a great many awards for that part, and we worked together brilliantly. I loved him, worshipped him, and he just knocked me silly. I remember begging him once, I said, look, you're new to this business, so please don't. Whatever you do, when we go in to do the rehearsals, we had a very big monologue, chit-chat together, not a monologue each. And I said, I had to tell him everything nobody had, including the director. I said, when we go in for these rehearsals, now just remember that they're technical rehearsals. They are for the crew and for marks and lighting and everything else. All you do is mutter your words and walk from point to point, because they will stop you when they want, all that. And I said, we'll do that twice. That'll be called a technical rehearsal, okay? And you don't do any acting, which he didn't. And I said, the final one, you will hear the bell go up, but a red light will not go up on the camera. When the red light's on the camera, it means you've got film in and they are turning. We're going. We're at it. But until you see that, you still do not act. Give a facsimile. So sound gets the level that the lighting man knows what he's doing. The camera boy can see what he's framing and all that. He forgot. If he forgot the panic and the excitement of it, because the bell went, everybody was silenced, everybody shrieked. It was a moment of supreme terror, which it always is. It was a 10-minute mag, 12-minute mag, I think, and he did the whole perf brilliantly. And he never did it again. You do get possessed, especially with Accident, for example. Playing Stephen in Accident was a man I had never remotely been like. I mean, he's the antithesis of who I am as a person. So it's much harder to play someone who's really so different to you, but could physically be so near you. Do you follow what I mean? Mentally, a totally different man. A Don, married, 2 children, going through the menopause, which I don't think I've had. I don't know, maybe it's coming now. I had to give him everything. He took over everything, and because it was Pinter, that's a very different matter. You're not just working and ad-libbing and chucking away lines. You are following a railway line, like a Hornby train set. You've got to go through it, through the tunnels, through the little bridges and over the level crossings and everything. As indicated, and Providence was the same thing. You have to submerge yourself entirely. In Providence, I was playing 2 different people. I was playing the real man at the very end of the film, and my father's imagination of me in one part, and in the third part, because there were 3 parts, his imagination of me translated to the novels he was thinking of in his head. So you try that for size. You try and ask a student to even attempt one of those things. You can't do it unless you are totally and utterly prepared to be dedicated and give it all up, and you are possessed, silly as it may seem, because it's re-representing, regurgitating somebody else entirely, from the way he would cut his toenails to the way he'd pick his nose. And it's got to be on the nail always. Otherwise, an audience is going to watch you acting, but they're not going to identify.
And furthermore, Father, since there was no point in telephoning you, far less in visiting you, we should only be exposing ourselves to our now familiar, mutual recriminations. No. Damn it all, Father, you're a rich man. So if you must do your dying with such a disgusting lack of dignity, why don't you do it in a nursing home or some such place where they can stand in amazed, well-paid tolerance while you shout, drink, and protest your way through death's dark door? The silence when you reach the other side will be our only reassurance that you've actually gone. And I could add, when you find yourself painfully alone.
You sod. You odious, sanctimonious, stiff-necked little crumb. I'm not having this, by...
I was raw edges for 12 years. I didn't know what I was doing. I just, I did what I was told and tried to pick up from people behind that and the Boom and various other places what I was doing right or wrong. I was doing things with my hand that I thought were terribly interesting, and they were using a 75. I didn't know what lenses were. I didn't know the camera was there, or that I was in long shot, or I wasn't even in the bloody shot at all. I had no idea. And one day, I think it was on Doctor at Sea, or one of those doctors, I can't remember which. I was, by this time, quite a big star and all that going on. I'd been with Rank for 10 years, 12 years by then. And we had always had the same crew on the Doctor films. I'd done about 3 of them by that time. And one day I was standing on the set, because I never left, as I told you, and I saw my operator, whom I knew very well, Bob Thompson. He's the last dead now. And Bob was leaning over the camera, as cameramen are wont to do, and just sort of looking at me intently. And I thought my flies were undone, looked down, or whatever. It was a very intense look. He was a short man with glasses, red hair, Scottish. And I said, "What is it, Bob? What's bugging you?" And he said, "Oh, nothing." He said, "I just wonder how the fuck you lasted." I thought, what do you do now? The blood drains out of you. I thought, either you take a swing at him, or you walk off and stamp your feet, or you ask him to help you. And I did. So I said, "What don't I know?" And he said, "Nothing. You don't know a bloody thing. You don't know anything about the job, do you?" And I said, "No, I don't." He said, "Do you know how many frames go through?" And I said, "No, I don't." He said, "You know what an inky dink is?" "No, I don't." "Do you know what a 75 is?" "No." "Do you know what a 4 is?" "No." He said, "Well, you don't know, do you? You know what a boom is?" And on we went. And over, of course, behind the director's back, always, because they used to Twitter and say, "What are you saying to Bob?" And you know all that. I was taught by my crew. My voice I had to deal with. That was pretty light, and the recording was pretty bad in those days. It's better now, and I brought it down and down and down and down. I'd do that myself. Nobody ever told me. I heard it and was offended. Oh, Christ, you can't talk like that. Oh, yes, you do. That's how you sound. And so it had to be dealt with. I've got a good left profile and a very bad right profile. This is the killer side. This is the little boy looking for God, or was many years ago when I was young. I was the Loretti Young of my day. I was only ever photographed on the left-hand profile, which is what you're doing at this minute. The sets were built for it. Now, the directors were told that because I knew that that was the angle that was bad, and I spoke to the cameraman, and they said yes, and the lighting men said yes, but we used to call it nigger you off. We can't use that phrase now, but I'm using it because it's an old-fashioned phrase, which meant by shadowing something, they could hide the worst. But those are the technical things you have to learn, and with sound, it was terribly important to learn from someone that you didn't close a door when you were saying the key word, or open a drawer and rustle newspaper, or whatever. And that if you were on location and you heard a motorcycle coming from Haywards Heath and you were in High Wycombe, your ears are so attuned you can hear 500 miles, that you could play that bike in so that they can cut it. But it won't be over anything you're doing or saying that matters. Do you follow what I mean? Well, if you're aware of all those things, no wonder you're half dead at the end of a day's shoot. You have to observe because you've got to see what people do. I mean, you're always representing some other person. I've never played myself in my life on the screen. So I've got to look at people and see how they do it. How do they pick up a cup? How are you left-handed? When you write a letter with your left hand, if you're a left-handed person, you have other imbalances as well, not just left-handing. So you've got to watch those things. And I've seen it myself, actually, even in intense grief. And despair, I've caught my face in a mirror, and through the misery and the despair and probably the tears, I've often looked up and thought, oh God, that's what I do. That's how it happens. That's how you look. Part of that mechanism up there is still clicking over in the most obscene manner. I am still collecting and observing. We were at Pinewood. I had the star table. Of course I would. I was, the king of Pinewood in those days. And Alan Ladd was over because things were folding in America, and he was doing a film called, I think it was called The Black Knight. And they used to sit at the table next to mine and send him up all the way through lunch, because he always came in a little bit late because he went to see his dailies at a different time to me. He came in and clattered down in his knight without armor thing, or whatever it was, chainmail. And they'd been saying really bloody things about him behind his back at this table. All his friends, I might say, all his mates, his stand-in, his double, stunt double. And one of them said, watch this, and said, hi, Alan, what you do today, then? And there was a dead silence at the table, and Alan just stood and looked at them. And he said, I did a great look. I thought, that's it. If you can do one great look, you're halfway in. I must reiterate each time, because I never know where you're going to put the scissors on this deal, that this is my point of view. It does not apply to actors in general, because they have their own points of view. But with my point of view, I have never worked with a director I did not like. I have sometimes worked with a director I didn't terribly respect, but that's force majeure if you've got to do 3 films a year anyway, whether you like them or not. You can't be choosing. But from my point of view, it has to be like a marriage. More than a marriage, because their marriages aren't always love affairs. It has to be a love affair. And that's got to last. And it is a total giving of your physical body, your mind, and your trust to some other person. And it's very hard to find those people. But if you do find them, never let them go. It's not a carnal thing. You can have a love affair without carnality. It is a lot to do with respect, and respect for somebody's mind and intellect that is higher by far than one's own. I mean, as far as I know, Visconti was the greatest teacher and professor I've ever had in my life. I learned so much from Visconti and from people like him. I was able to hand it on to other people. But I mean, the fact that he and Losi and Cukor and Schlesinger to a degree, all of them, René, nobody ever told me what to do. No one ever did that. None of my directors did. They would say what not to do. The only instructions ever that Visconti gave me on Death in Venice was one day, about 2/3 of the way through the shooting of the movie, and we were on the Grand Canal. It was noon, it was middle of lunchtime, hot sun overhead, and I was in a little tiny motorboat going under the Rialto Bridge, and he was in the boat beside me with the camera crew. They were shooting side on, and he shouted at me through a megaphone, "Bogarde, when you get bridge under bridge, you feel shadow, huh? Then you stand. When you feel sun." And he put the mic down, and we went on. I went running through, because that was not recorded, that sound. And I felt the shade going over my head, and then I saw the sun and rose to the sun. And that moment on the screen and in the cinema is the moment in Mahler when that great surge of the second or fifth, I can't remember which now, symphony comes roaring up, and it was brought the audience to its standing roaring ovation, because I didn't know he was going to choreograph everything I did to the music of Mahler, and that is why the musical tape or record or compact disc of the film music does not please professional musicians, because the orchestra was orchestrating to my movements. And if I was slow, then it was slow. They took it slower if they were up. I mean, it was all entirely due to me. And I had no idea. When I left with Death in Venice, I remember taking off those spectacles that I had to wear. I had no makeup. And I had my hair cut off, because I'd grown it quite long. I hate long hair. And I watched, while they were doing that in a little hut in the garden, we finished the film on location in Austria, and I watched them, the wardrobe lady wrapping everything up and putting them away. And that was von Eschenberg. I had 3 suits, and she wasn't hanging them on a hanger for tomorrow. They were being rolled into a bundle, like for Oxfam. That was the end of him. And his high-button boots I saw slung in now. Well, good riddance to those anyway. He'd gone. Like all love affairs that finish, they all have to. Intense, burning ones do. It's a form of desolation at the end, of course it is. And that's possibly partly why one behaved so stupidly. I mean, I wept all the way home. I cried and blubbed all the way home in the car from location when we finished Accident, when I knew that Stephen had gone, because although I was still manufacturing the person in my body, he was still around. I was still wearing his clothes. I was driving home. But nobody wanted him. And I had no need of him. When I finally finished with Fassbinder, and I saw the cut of Despair, it was called, in Paris, where we did just some extra looping lines, and I saw it in black and white, and it was absolutely staggeringly magical, the whole film. It was quite long. It was nearly 3.5 hours. And when I saw it in Cannes, the lighting cameraman came running towards me on the Carlton Hotel terrace and said, "Don't come to the press show, I beg you. Fassbinder's up in his room. He's not going to do anything. He's completely stupid. And he's ruined the film. He's cut everything to pieces." And he looked at Andrea Ferriol, who was my partner in it, and he said to Andrea, "And you don't exist. Vous n'existez pas." Well, when we saw it, we had to go out of duty to the press. I mean, it was a terrific thing, a Fassbinder first night. And the first time he'd ever worked with professional actors, Andrea and me. I made him come down. He came down, and he behaved appallingly and looked so stupid. I'm saying these things about a man I absolutely revered. And he's dead now, so I can say it. I wouldn't. He was a genius, and geniuses are not. I say that quite calmly and clearly. He was a genius. And geniuses are notoriously loony, because there's a very fine line between madness and genius. I mean, it's a hair. But he'd taken whatever pills he took, and he had this and that and the other, and he was in a dirty black T-shirt, and he insulted the press, he insulted us all, and he said the film was a message for his suicide. Well, I knew more than they did that he was talking the truth. But the point was, I felt everything I'd ever had and talked to you about draining out of me. Sitting there at the press thing with the lights all on, all these idiots waiting with questions boys from every newspaper in the world there at those press conferences at Cannes. It's a big deal. With Andra sitting icily beside me, despairingly, because her performance had been wrecked and mine had been fucked up anyway. And I just thought, no, go back to the farm, because I was only up the mountain 45 minutes away, and never come back.
How childish. Good people. We are making a film here. In a minute, I will be coming out. But you must keep the policeman back, so that I can get away. I'm a film actor. I'm coming out. Don't look at the camera. I'm coming out.
Hollywood came to England, and they came after us. They came shopping after the war. And quite right, they wanted an intake of fresh blood. So they bought Deborah, they bought Stuart Granger, they bought Jimmy Mason, they bought Gene Simmons, and they came to Uncle Dirk, and I was bought too. But I wasn't going to play an Englishman. I was given a contract which so frightened me when I looked at it. I had a bungalow with a number in Pacific Palisades. I had a foreign, because that was important to the trick, a foreign car, which was a Volkswagen, little one, Beetle. And I was being sent across the border into Tijuana and beyond, in Mexico, for 2 years to learn intensive Spanish, because I was being re-imported as their Spanish star, because apparently I look Spanish. And they had all the English, the British, and everything, but I was unknown. This was before I signed with rank. And I thought, well, I don't think I can go through with this. I knew what I was going to be paid. I knew how long it was going to be. I thought, well, do I really want to go there and become Ricardo? I know what his name was, Ricardo something. He even had a name for me. Living in Pacific Palisades. And this is the bit. I was offered a list, or shown a list, not offered it. And the lady, whose name I won't mention, said, who was doing the deal, the contract at the Dorchester Hotel, said, you will have, at the end of the first year of contract, to choose one of the following. They're all under contract to us, and they're all nice, clean girls. They're all safe, but you have to marry one. Unless, of course, you have married before, but then you will need our permission. Because we want you to marry, somebody that is part of the studio. I thought, I'm 26. I've just finished a war with 7 medals. What am I doing with these people? So I tore it up and walked home in the snow with no shoes. I mean, I had shoes, but they had holes in them. That's why I didn't go to Hollywood. It wasn't for me, anyway. I didn't want the loot. And I didn't want to marry a nice, clean girl on 20th Century Fox list. And the other thing was I could divorce her within a year, and they'd take care of the press. So everything is worked out to a last degree for you, and you can say, well, it couldn't be true, it can't happen, but it is true, and it did. It did happen. I mean, somebody as magical as Marilyn Monroe. I mean, Marilyn was totally and utterly murdered by them, by their system, and to a great degree, Judy, whom I knew very, very closely and well for about 10 years, I did her last movie with her, but they killed Judy. They've killed anybody of any sensitivity. I mean, you have to get out. It's clear that I did have a form of sex appeal, certainly for what we call the teenagers, before the Beatles came in and before they were pop stars. I mean, I was number one on the top for well, I was never off the list until 61. I began to slide. I was always in the first 10 anyway at the box office, but I was first and second always for a number of years. I think it was the kind of films I did, you know, Little Boy Looking for God, Staunch Upper Lip, Brave Captains. I mean, I took care to look pretty. Now, the fact that I was as scrawny as as a plucked hen, and a skinny hen at that, it didn't seem to matter. I mean, the rank organization did supply me with dumbbells and great sets of wheels that I was supposed to do that with. All I did was put on 2 sweaters and then put my shirt on and then put my jacket on, so everything was tailored that way. But it didn't matter. People didn't mind me being scrawny. I think it wasn't important. But the boys that were what they called beefcake in those days, I mean, where are they now? I'm not saying that with any malice. It was a non-lasting phase. I know one actor who had to have his jeans sewed up at the side, and the wardrobe mistress complained in the end and said, I'm not going through with this any longer. It's ridiculous showing off like that. But it didn't do him any good. Not for long. He wasn't a very good actor. But I'd been a better actor and wasn't a very good film star. Should we put it that way? I leapt into black leather in an instant. We sold 10,000 pairs of trousers in the King's Road after the release of Anacleto. Yeah, sure, I'm not an idiot. I was totally aware that the English hero in movies was usually dressed in tweeds and a Pringle V-neck sweater, and always baggy trousers. Now, that wasn't my scene, and it wasn't for the audiences, and I switched that around. I remember working with Losi, the first film we ever did together, which was Sleeping Tiger, and he said, this is sexually charged, and all that. I hadn't heard these words from the rank organization in my life before. I'd only been doing it for 4 or 5 years. Sexually charged, what does that mean? I said, well, what do I wear? And he said, in this scene. And Joe said, well, have we got continuity on this? I said, no, there's no continuity. And he said, well, get into your boots and your breeches again, because there was a riding scene. And he had Alexis do the same, so there was a supercharge. I was being photographed with sexual content. Well, I didn't miss out on that. I learnt from that. And people, particularly women in audiences, don't quite know what nerve has been hit. But they know that they found you attractive, and they don't quite know why. Because women are just as sexually aware as fellas are, let me tell you. And Uncle Dirk got a great deal of mail, and always has had, from people who went a little further than they perhaps should have done. The cinema is a sexual thing. You go to the movies for sex. You may not go there to watch a porno movie, so I don't mean that kind of thing. But it is a sexual excitement. Nobody wants to go see tea cozies at work. I think the rank organization, quite rightly, those rather jealous ones said, oh, well, you're really a teddy bear. People would rather take you to bed than have you in bed. I was known as the sort of hot water bottle figure. Well, that didn't bother me, because I knew that it really wasn't so, that the reaction I was getting to my work and to being who I was, that people were turned on by me when I was young, I'm talking about, not now. And there was an alchemy at work, and so I used it. I had no reason to suppose that I could win, but I mean, it was all cheating. I had to have my hair permed, a light perm, but I had to have it done because I've got hair like a doll. I've discovered something now that we've got here called mousse, and that's great. I can manage. But otherwise, I'm as bald as a coot, really, and it's all chicanery. The whole thing is fake. But then that's what sex is. It's an illusion. That's what the cinema is. It's illusion. But I was jolly sure that I was going to make every wing commander I played as physically possible and attractive as I could, as mischievous, as flirty, as whatever you like. I was totally aware of it. And when I realized that I was working on screen, which I only did like 3 years afterwards, I wasn't a very good actor, all those things, but something was happening, then I nursed it. I had a special little light for my eyes. It was called a bar, Dirk's Bar. Have you got Bogarde's bar or Dirk's Bar? Nobody else had it. I had it, because the only thing I had that was a good feature were my eyes. I didn't like the stardom. I never have, if that's what it was called. I hated it. It stopped me doing the theatre. I lost my nerve in the theatre because of the perfectly sweet fans who used to come screaming to the theatre to see me in a play by Beckett or Jean Anouilh or something like that, and they didn't know what the hell they were looking at. And they broke up the place and threw meat pies at us, you know, that kind of thing. We love you, Dirk, and all, you know, great, but it was a ruin. It ruined the plays, it ruined the company, and it ruined what I was trying to do anyway, so I thought, pack it up. But I mean, I hated that, not being in control myself. I think that's probably what it is, in control is what I want to be. You see, people said how brave I was to be in the film with Judy Garland. I wasn't brave. I wasn't self-sacrificing. I wrote all her material. And it was one of the greatest privileges of my acting life, was to work with that actress. And she was a monster. She was monstrous, but she was magic. Well, you don't get that. And I worked with some of the greatest of those ladies. Ava Gardner was a sweet, adorable creature. Well, you don't get those chances. So you've got to work at your charm. You've got to work at the sex appeal. But there came a time when that had to finish, and you had to put on Barrett's shoes and Barrett's hat and creep around the house and be the servant. Okay, fine. So you give up all the rest, but I'd had it. I'm very glad. Nice while it lasted.
Oh, come on, come on. Have a little sip, see what it tastes like.
I told you I'm not drinking.
Go now. Look, just have a little sip, that's all. Just a sip. There you are. You see? I can still think of things that will please you, can't I? You won't get many better than me, you know. What do you want? Old hag running around the house, getting you up in the morning at crack of dawn, telling you what to do. My only ambition's to serve you, you know that, don't you? I'm sorry, I've been a bit edgy lately. Oh, well, I admit I make mistakes, but after all, I'm only human, aren't I? You wouldn't like me if I wasn't human, would you? The place could be cleaner, that's all. Well, I know it could be a bit cleaner. That's what I've been going on about for days. Listen. Listen. Perhaps we could both make an extra effort. You're right there, Tony. You're dead right. That's what we ought to do.
The last two films I did in Great Britain were American financed and made by America. One was for MGM and the other one was for Paramount. They were both here. They weren't British movies. So they were made in 1966, and that was the end of it. That was curtains for me. Shepperton went, Pinewood went, and the money went because the Americans who had the ED plan and had all the tax allowances were sent home, right? And that's why the cinema really broke in this country, because nobody had the money. So there was Uncle Dirk left with nothing to do, and all these new children coming whizzing in, the Tom Courtneys, the Terence Stamps, the Albert Finneys, rightly, because they have to have a recharge. And what do? But I did get an offer for a commercial, which I've always refused to do, but this time I did. I thought, well, you know, why do it for free if they're going to pay me? To see me. So they did pay me. They paid me $25,000 to run up and down the Spanish Steps.
You must forgive me. I knew I'd forgotten something.
when I got to the top of the Spanish Steps, no big deal, two ladies who came all the way from America and they paid for them, had to say to each other, oh, surely that was Dirk Bogarde I saw coming up on the Foster Grant sunshades. That was the commercial. That's what I got $25,000 for. That's all I had to do. I thought that was good. But it was in the paper that I was there, because they were all taking pictures of me running up down the Spanish Steps, and somebody called Visconti, Luchino Visconti, saw it, sent me a script, and said, well, I'd like to work with him. And that's really how The Damned started, and eventually Death in Venice. But that's really, apart from Jean Renoir, that's how, in 1967, my future was mapped for him, by running up and down the Spanish Steps in a pair of Foster Grant sunshades. I don't regret that at all. The film I did with Visconti, The Damned, was cut to ribbons. We had no money, ran out of them. But I had decided then and there never to come back. And so there I stayed. And my life completely changed. So while all the boys were getting on with it here in Bolton and Wigan and stations north, I was whooping it up in Tunis and Algiers and wherever I wanted to all over Europe, making movies for Europe, but making European movies. And that was vastly exciting. I think I did my time. I remember leaving England with most of my worldly goods, but in particular I remember the customs officer at Dover. Oh, he said, would you like to get out of your car, Mr. Bogarde? So I got out of my car, I was getting on the ferry, and I had another car, my stand-in Arnold was driving full of my books and papers and things. He said, how much money have you got on you? I asked, so I told him, £350 each. We weren't allowed more in those days. And he said, is that all? And I said, yes. He said, how long are you going for then? May I ask that? And I said, you may. He said, well, you haven't answered my question. So I said, I'm going forever. And there was a long silence. I remember thinking, God, I've done it now. And he simply said, well, £325 isn't going to last you long, is it? So I said, no, I anticipate working there. He said, well, it's all right for some, isn't it? Would I look at your tyres? So they stripped the two cars. We missed two ferries. And it was just the English saying, well, sod you. If you're going to leave remembering. And I didn't come back for over 2 years. Anthony Forward had become my agent in 1938-39, but my sudden success after the war as a movie actor meant that representing me became a full-time job for him. And my decision to leave England obviously had a great effect on him too. I made this decision really through a lawyer who said, if you hang on here any longer, you'll be ruined, tax-wise. I would advise you to leave, so I left. When I told Forward this, after all these years of management, he looked at me rather helpless and said, well, Christ, all I've done is look after you for all these years, because he turned down everybody else. Because I had become so big, much quicker than we even thought or imagined, and his life was cut out looking after me. So if I'm not going to work anymore, what's he going to do? His son was grown up and married, and okay. He had no responsibilities. He was divorced. And I said, well, look, I can't drive, which is a good excuse as any. I'd killed some people in a very bad car crash and lost my nerve, quite simply. And I said, well, give it a try. Come out with me. I'm going to find somewhere to live. I'm probably going to work with Visconti. Come and try it. I need you to help me over that first contract anyway, because I can't understand Italian, neither can you. But we will be able to do something together. We'll find an English-speaking agent, which we did, and from there it went on. Because I couldn't actually work without him. I couldn't operate. I didn't know how to sign a check. I was never allowed any money. I never did sign a check. I never had a credit card. I still haven't. I can now write a check, and I do carry loose change in my pocket. I never did. I was never allowed to, because I was so stupid. That, in fact, lawyers and people say, well, you know, you just let Forward do everything, because he will settle everything, which he did. But he was the front guy for me. If I said, look, I don't want to wait another 6 weeks to do the shot, or he would like air conditioning, it's 48 degrees or whatever. He did all that kind of crap, and all I had to do was go be Dorothy adorable to everybody on the set and do my job, which is very important. We became glued. And when I made it quite clear to Ford, and he understood, I said, either you stay, and, you know, he said, well, I can stay because there's nothing else for me to do. I couldn't take on, and we named 3 people that he could have worked for, who were anxious for him to work for them. And he said, I think, I'm older than, he's 8 years older than me. He said, I'm 58, and in a little time I'll be 60. I'm going to, if it's all right with you, I'll hang on. So he did the other side of my life, insofar as he did the mowing, the heavy mowing, and he dealt with the tractors, he dealt with the sheep, he dealt with all the other stuff, and with the publishers, who are now my new world. With books, with contracts. I couldn't read a contract. All I could read really was Eisel on a toilet roll. I mean, I was pretty dumb. That's how it was, but it was an entire world. And the world finished literally one day when he had come back from shopping in the market, and I was busy on a book. I leant out of my studio window and I said, have you been to the doctor? Because he had a bad foot, which had started to hurt him in Hollywood a bit, on the film with Glenda Jackson. And he said, yeah, yes, it's nothing. And he was undoing the luggage, the dogs were all, you know, shopping, and the dogs were all leaping around him. And he said, it's nothing, it's just it's a slight touch of Parkinson's. That was it. He didn't know, but I knew that was it. Because that was the finish. Because Parkinson's doesn't get better. And if I couldn't drive and he couldn't drive, he could do the heavy machines and all that stuff. You know, the 22-year idol, or idol, whatever you call it, had to finish in time, which he did about 2 years later. I knew the moment that Parkinson's was mentioned and confirmed that you don't get a touch of Parkinson's, so you've got to be real and grown up. Okay? And that means that your life has got to alter again. I wasn't prepared for cancer at the same time. So a double burden was a kind of full reward for the years of pleasure. And I knew they had to finish. And when they finished, and I got rid of the farm, in 3 weeks, it was a lifetime gone, because I really had my building plot, my burial plot. I had my plot in the cemetery. You have to buy it and appeal to the mayor and all that. And I'd been a resident for, I think, about 4 years before I left. So, I mean, I was there. I had no claim in my mind of ever coming back. But you can't reckon with those things. And he wanted to come back to die, naturally enough, with his son and with his grandson by this time, and with the rest of his family around him. Quite right. And also, he did say, you know, I don't really want to face the end of my life in great pain, which, if it's going to be painful, paralyzed, if I'm going to be paralyzed, in a foreign language, up a mountain. What can we do? What can I do? What can I do? Except get him out. So I did. You can do it, if you have to. You'll get a stroke in the end, but you have to do it. Because, you know, the one thing you are given, which I learned as a young boy, is that you are given life. And if you watch it crumbling before you, as I had to do forward, if you've seen it as a young man, as I did in the war, then you realize that what you've got is a slender flame. And you've got to hang on to that like hell. I had a stroke myself, unfortunately. I mean, this is a story for all time, right? You've got it. It's a great script. But when I had my stroke, until that moment, I was always going home. I was never going to come stay here. I'd have sold up everything, as I did, and then I'd gone back. But after, if you've had one stroke, you don't want another one. And I'm 71 now. And you get a little bit anxious that it might happen again. And it happened so suddenly. I was down a staircase 1 minute with my head between the banisters. I don't want it to happen too far away from people I love, my family, my brothers and sisters. You know, so I stayed put. So I'm waiting.